From old sculptures, to a collection of used tires, to wreckage from Apollo 11, you can find a lot of interesting things underwater. It's a mysterious world that's inherently dark and spooky, something that's helped to inspire some of the greatest movie directors of all time. Unfortunately, I've been to the depths and spent hours searching underwater, and I'm here to tell you that I couldn't find a good game in Anoxemia. As a setup, it's hard not to be excited to dive into the debut from Ukrainian developer BSK Games. You play a researcher who's been tasked with collecting samples from a contaminated area under the sea. But things go terribly wrong when all communication is lost and a submarine crashes on the ocean floor. This has all the makings of an insanely tense adventure where our hero is constantly looking to survive and make his way home to safety. I knew something was wrong right from the get-go when I realized that we're not actually controlling the lone survivor. Instead, you move an orb around the screen and our hero is supposed to follow. Frustratingly, it's not as easy as it sounds, and the diver will constantly get stuck on his rocky surroundings and have a hard time following along. This makes his job of picking up useful items and replenishing his oxygen to be a nightmare, which in turn makes playing the game a real pain. Anoxemia is split into 38 bite-sized levels, each with the goal of finding the required pickups needed in order to advance. There are occasional moments that hint at a larger science fiction story, but you're mostly just searching the ocean's floor for plants and power-ups. We're given sonar that can highlight both good and bad things in the surrounding area, as well as a harpoon gun that can move stubborn boulders and a spark that can short-circuit the magnetic field sprinkled around the level. All of these things will come in handy as you explore what should have been a fascinating world. The game is at its best when you're puzzling your way through the various stages. You'll occasionally need to destroy walls and block airflows in order to advance, which can get complicated as you move through the increasingly difficult stages. While most of the areas are too simple for their own good, there were a few parts that made me see the potential of a game like this and why the developers wanted to make it in the first place. But every time I started to come around on Anoxemia, the game would seemingly go out of its way to yank me back to reality. One of the biggest issues is that it's far too dark and hard to navigate. It's not always clear where the walls are and why you can't get around. There are levels where you can barely see where the passages are, to the point where it often felt like I was swimming blind. You would think that the sonar equipment would make life easier, but it doesn't. And even if you do find where you're supposed to be going, the diver will sometimes ignore your commands and do his own thing. It's really frustrating. Of course, the real problem is that you're occasionally forced to replay past levels because you accidentally didn't find the power-up or an oxygen boost. I hit a wall about halfway through where I spent a good hour trying to figure out what I was supposed to do, only to realize that I hadn't found enough power-ups in the previous stages. It's far too easy to skip past the supposedly optional crates before finishing the stage, only to later realize that going back and finding them is the only way to advance the story. This happened multiple times in my playthrough, mostly because the game is incredibly bad at explaining what you'll need going forward. This isn't fun, and I wouldn't be surprised if most people eventually give up instead of backtrack. And even if you do find the power-ups you need, the game has a bad tendency of putting them just out of reach. There were several times when I would open a crate only to discover the power-up was stuck in a wall, making it literally impossible for me to pick it up. Going back and replaying the stage doesn't work because the crate and power-up is gone. This means you have to backtrack even more, which, like I said, is not fun. If Anoxemia gets anything right, it's the tranquil tone and atmosphere. There's a soothing vibe to the game that is both relaxing and a little scary, which could have been the building blocks for a truly memorable experience. Unfortunately, this underwater adventure is memorable for all the wrong reasons. This is yet another example of a bad game with a compelling setup. Between the science fiction story and the unique locations, Anoxemia has a lot of untapped potential. But any good aspects are thwarted by terrible controls and way too much backtracking. Anoxemia is a baffling adventure that isn't worth diving into. Hey, thanks for watching our review. After spending a full week playing nothing but Persona 5, I was kinda hoping to jump into some good games. But that didn't happen. Perhaps things will improve when I take a look at Red Death, Beat Cop, Skip Chaser, Mr. Shifty, and a whole bunch of other games I've been meaning to play. I have a huge stack I need to get through, so expect this to be a week of catching up. I recommend you click the subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.